Hello everybody. Thank you for joining us again to this section. Let me share my screen so you can see this amazing photo with our presenters' photos and names and stores. So welcome all to our last section from today's sections, and this is demo lessons for Boom for Autism. So here with us we have Nikki Robertson from Teaching Autism, and we have Jen Adams from Teach Love Autism. So thank you both for being here presenting with us. First things first, I'm sure you already know, if you're joining us since this morning, we have a Q&A box. This is super important to put all your questions there because in the chat it can get lost. So go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A box and we'll be answering those at the end of this section. And also in the chat, you can comment anything you want, any positive comments. I'm seeing people already commenting, where are they from? And we have from Arkansas, Wisconsin, Canada, New Jersey, Michigan, Pittsburgh, San Diego, Colorado. Oh, sorry, San Diego, California, Colorado, Montreal, Los Angeles, Canada. So thank you all for joining us. This is very exciting. So yeah, at the end of the section, we'll be sharing in our chat a feedback form. So please make sure to fill that up. We read those feedbacks and we learn from them and we apply what you say. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters so they can present themselves and start this demo lesson for autism.
Hi, I'm gonna go first. So I am Nikki from Teaching Autism. You may know me online. I am an autism specialist of over 10 years. I have experience working with children from 3 years old up to 19 years old. So I have worked with both ends of diagnosing children and introducing them to school for the first time, right up until having students leave us after 16 years at our school and moving on to their adult life. So I kind of have experience of all ends with it. I, for the last 6 years, have worked mostly with 3 to 7-year-olds, and I was terrified after leaving the teenagers to go to what we call the babies, and ended up loving it. And so I haven't moved from there since. So it was really good for me to find Boom cards because it was so hard to work on ICT skills with 3-year-olds. So Boom cards made this so much easier, especially for my students who didn't really have a lot of mouse skills and keyboard skills. So Boom has been able to transform how I work with my students on ICT. So today I'm going to be sharing a little bit more about how we use them. Yanni wanted me to teach on Errorless learning and also to touch on the way that I lay out my Boom cards. So they might look a little boring to you, but a lot of people like to make these really pretty Boom cards. It doesn't work with my students. So I've noticed over the years that my students really respond best when I am only presenting them with what I need them to do. So I can't have all the pretty borders and all the pretty fluffy things. I can't have the pretty fonts. It's got to be basic, simple. So while it might look boring, there is a reason for it if you're sort of new to Boom cards. So let me just share my screen so that you can see. Here we go. Okay, so this is going to be how to use Boom cards with your autistic learners. So this was just kind of what I just went over with you, specialist of over 10 years, 3 to 19-year-olds. I do focus mainly on 3 to 7-year-olds now. So you might find that my Boom cards may be a little bit young for if you have students who are a little bit older, but you'll still be able to see how this can be used with those older students. And Jen might have some that are better for older students too, that are a bit more age appropriate. So you might get lucky and find something for both today. So when you're starting to look at boom cards, I don't want you to get stressed. So I, in the classroom, hate change. So I understand my students really well. I hate any form of change, and any new software is usually a no. So when I had to learn boom cards, it was a huge panic. So I'm going to show you some of those basic steps for using boom cards, and also starting with errorless learning. So me and Yanni were talking this week, and she really wanted me to share some errorless learning activities with you all. So your students are more likely to complete activities when they feel good and they feel confident and they're being successful. So whenever I introduce something completely new to my students, I do try and go with the errorless learning first of all, so that they have that success right from the beginning. And then I'm going to touch on my life skills lesson plan, so you can see how I incorporate boom cards into an actual lesson with my students. So this is going to be part of my Therapy Thursday plan. So if you follow my blog or you follow my podcast, you've probably heard about Therapy Thursday. So I'm going to touch on that today, but I'm going to focus mostly on the life skill centers with using those boom cards. So choosing the right decks, this is probably the most important part of starting to use boom cards. You need to choose the right deck for your students. So like I said, you need to keep it super simple. So I had a teacher growing up who always used to tell me the KISS method and keep it super simple. And I think that works best for our students in all areas. So think of your classroom decor, think of resources that you're making. The simpler it tends to be, the better for them. And also level appropriate. So 3 to 7-year-olds for me, they are amazing on the iPad, but the computer was a whole new ballgame for them. So keyboards, trying to learn how to type, trying to learn how to use their mouse, all things like that. So try and make sure that you're choosing decks at your students' level that they can access. So whether you're going to start with just clicking, whether you're going to work on dragging, whether it's going to be typing. It's important to find those successful decks right from the beginning. And then accessible. So some learners are going to want audio instructions, and others you might want to mute. So I have students who don't like to take verbal instructions off anyone except a specific member of staff. And then I have learners who will happily take audio instructions from anyone. And then others then, we're going to progress to, can they understand written instructions? Can they take that and can they act on that without a person there trying to help them and trying to read out the instructions to them? So we're trying to work on those understanding and following written instructions. Some are going to need it louder than others. Some are going to want quiet audio. Some are going to want headphones. So the great thing on Boom is when you go to find a deck, you can actually preview them and you can see if it's going to be a right fit. So if it doesn't have audio instructions, obviously you can narrate and you can verbalize what you want your students to do. But if you want it to be an independent station, then that's probably not going to be the right Boom deck because you're going to have to support them. So using Boom cards for the first time. So you're going to want to choose a device that they're going to be confident with. So I always start with the interactive whiteboard. I find that my students do really well on the interactive whiteboard. We use it a lot, especially for morning meeting. So it's a really nice transition from morning meeting to Boom cards on the interactive whiteboard. Everyone's already in a group, and I'll start with my staff completing a few Boom cards themselves. So my students can sit and they can see those Boom cards in action and they're learning already. And then we're going to start with Errorless. So you're going to build your students' confidence and independence. They're going to be able to focus just on what to do and not trying to figure out the right answer as well. And then make it fun. So I always start by using decks students will have fun with. So tie it with their interests or something that they'll enjoy, something that's fun. And then you've got them engaged. And as soon as you have them engaged, they're going to want to come back and do more of these Boom cards with you. So this is one of my Errorless learning decks. So if you're new to Errorless learning, it's a technique in teaching that we diminish the opportunity for anyone to make a mistake. So this is great for working on confidence and independence. If you have students who really struggle with making mistakes, and especially with self-confidence, this is the best place for you to start with them. So this one's click and drag. So typically when I start introducing, I will start with what level I think my students are best at. So it might be click, it might be that they're ready for this click and drag. So with this boom card here, we're working on animal habitats. So right now, my focus isn't really to get the students to find the correct answer. I want them to learn how to use the boom deck. So I want them to understand that I need them to click the answer and I need to drag that answer into the box and click submit. So there's no wrong answers. There's no way for them to get this wrong. So this gives me loads of opportunities to give a lot of positive reinforcement. So I'm constantly telling them how good they're doing, how they got it right. And this fuels the motivation then for them to come back and keep using boom decks over and over. If you go straight in and you introduce them to a really hard deck, they might start to lose confidence. They might get a little bit stressed. They might feel not very motivated. They don't really know how to do it. So that's going to start to cause some issues. So by having these errorless learning decks, you're taking away all of that and you're just giving them that positive motivation. So this one here is a click one. So this is one I'll typically start with for my students. So they're just going to count how many bars are in the jar. And then you just click the number. So you're just teaching them that to choose the correct answer, they just need to click. So we're getting used to, we click and that's the answer. Once students have done this, you can move to click and drag. Once they've done that, you can have them sort in multiple cards at once. You can also progress to typing. So typing I find very hard for my students in an errorless learning setting. The goal at that point is just to get them to touch keys and to type. So that's kind of easier when you're moving out of errorless learning, but it's just that progression. So think about using task boxes for the first time or task cards, adaptive books. Everything's a slow progression with our students so we can work up those skills so we don't overwhelm them right from the start. So once errorless learning is mastered, we're going to progress on to non-errorless tasks. So I know Yanni wanted me to talk about errorless learning today, but I am conscious that we have other great presenters as well, Jen's here, so I didn't want to take up too much time. So I have a blog post all about errorless learning. There's a bunch of boom decks in there that focus on errorless learning if you wanted to try those out. So Therapy Thursday, I started in my classroom probably around 2016. And I went to my admin at the time and stated that I wanted to focus on things that weren't necessarily in our curriculum. And I had been at the school for a few years at this time, so the confidence was there, and we wanted to focus on life skills, art therapy, sensory stories, all fun things like that. There are a lot of functional skills for our students. And it can be really hard to set this up for the first time. So especially with life skill stations, I didn't have a budget. Everything was going to come out of my own pocket. And life skill stations, they add up very quickly if you're shopping out and about for them. It can be even things like buying clothes, buying socks to match. It all adds up very quickly. And I wanted my students to be able to work on these skills in other ways as well. So this is where we started to use boom cards. So for my life skills activities on Therapy Thursday, I split my students up into 5 centers. And one center is always boom cards. The great thing with boom cards is I can have it on the interactive whiteboard. So this one here is just discussing our feelings and managing our emotions and thinking about how things may make us feel. So I can have this running on the interactive whiteboard while my other students are completing tasks. But this also gets my students thinking, and it's an independent station. So they're going to be up there and they're going to be thinking these things through. They are manned by staff, so staff can then initiate conversations from these boom cards. So they can add on to the conversation of, why do you think it makes you feel that way? Do you think it would make someone else feel happy? Do you think it would make someone else feel sad? So this boom deck, while it's just focusing on, click and drag that answer, it opens up even more opportunities, but it also transfers to other areas within the classroom as well. So you can make these teachable moments This also improved our ICT skills. So like I said, that was very hard for our 3-year-olds, many of whom the only ICT skills that they had were on iPads and usually watching YouTube. So they didn't really understand how to use boom cards in the beginning. So these errorless ones were great to start with, and then we moved on to these harder ones. And it means that we can work on them in a different setting, and it wasn't costing me a fortune to set these things up. So again, we can use ones then that transfer to home as well. So where do things belong? So this one, where does the bathtub belong? Is it in the bathroom? Where does the chair belong? Is it in the dining room? Is it outside? And we're trying to start working on those skills that maybe families don't have a lot of time to work on at home. So we can work on them in school, and they can transfer those skills back to their home life. So they can start to do more chores around the house, more tidying up, more cleaning, more organizing. If you have older students who are going to be leaving school, a lot of my students would then go on to adult residentials. So they're going to be responsible for their own bedroom, potentially a shared kitchen. So these life skills boom cards are really good for starting to get in those basic ground skills, and then we can transfer those back into the home. So this is just a rough overview of what our life skills session looks like on Therapy Thursday. So there's 5 centers, and then of course one of those are the boom decks. So I'll touch quickly on the other ones just so you can envision how it looks in the classroom. So I'll have 4 tables and an interactive whiteboard for boom cards, and on each table is a member of staff with an activity, and then I rotate my students. So typically I'll have 6 to 7 students and 5 staff. So the student who isn't at a center, they can go and have some choice time, some relaxed time, and then they'll rotate onto the next center when their time is up. The good thing with boom cards is if I need the computer and the interactive whiteboard for something else, I can set that center up as iPads. I can set it up on the iPods. I can set it up on a laptop in the corner of the room. If I want students to go to the boom deck station when they're not in one of the other centers, I can set that up for them as well. So the one that I use the most in my life skills lessons is the grocery shopping boom deck. So we are really fortunate in that we get to go shopping at the grocery store on quite a regular basis, but only for half the year. The other half of the year, we don't get that access. And what I was finding is that during those 6 months, my students came on really well. They were so good. They could follow their shopping list. They could make their shopping list with some help. We could pay at the cashier. But when we had a break, those skills were getting lost. So I wanted something that was interactive, that would work on these skills again without costing a fortune in having to buy all the different play food and the shopping cart and the role play area. So boom cards were really good for this. It increased their independence, and a lot of my students were able to transfer the skills that they learned in these boom cards from following the shopping list right back to when we went to the grocery store, because we were working on those skills in a different setting. And that was really important for me. I want them to master skills, and I want them to transfer those skills into different settings, different activities, different environments. So boom cards are really good for doing that and having them work on those skills in a way that maybe we wouldn't have before. So this is a quick overview of what the other centers will look like, just to give you a visual of what that looks like in my classroom. But boom decks complement really well because it gives them a break as well from these, what they feel are more hands-on and focused tasks. I always find that when they use boom cards, they're a little bit more relaxed. They think it's a bit more of a fun task. They don't always necessarily realize that they're working on all these skills. They think that they're having a bit of free choice almost on the whiteboard and the iPads. So that was really important for me to have fun ones that would still work on those functional skills. So that was just a quick look into Errorless learning with boom cards and how to choose the correct boom decks for your students, especially if you have young children like I do at 3 and you're introducing them for the first time, and then how that fits into center rotations as part of life skills activities as well. And I've also linked here a bunch of free boom cards that you can try out maybe at home first, so you can get a feel to how to use them with your students, and they're all free over on the Boom website. And these are perfect to use with your special ed and autistic students.
Thank you very much for that amazing presentation, Nikki. You're great. So now let's just go over to Jen's presentation, and then we already have a couple of questions in the Q&A box. So after Jen's presentation, we'll go over those questions. So go ahead, Jen.
All right, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm excited to be talking all about boom cards today. But first, before I dive into the boom cards and share ways I've used them, I wanted to share a little bit of background information with all of you in case you don't know who I am. So my name is Jen Adams. I am the author and founder of Teach Love Autism. It's a blog, website, site, store, and all of those good things. You can find me on Facebook, all kinds of social media, of course. But of course, all of that stemmed first from me being a teacher. So I started out in education a little differently. I did not go to school for special ed to start. I actually earned my bachelor's in elementary and early childhood first. So I understand Nikki and all of her early childhood explanation she was giving there. I thought that was my home and my love. And then once I got into the classroom, I found my heart just attaching to the special education students that were included in my classroom, and decided to go back and get my master's in special education about 2 years into teaching. And so I went back, got my master's degree in special education, and then found myself teaching self-contained autistic support at the middle school level, which was totally out of my realm, and what I thought I would be comfortable with teaching based on getting my elementary and early childhood degree. But I actually found that I loved teaching the middle school population, especially my students in the autistic support classroom. So what I plan to share with you today is going to be a little bit of some of those things I've used, but I also think a lot of it can be used in the elementary setting as well, utilizing a lot of the supports like Nikki had shared, errorless learning, decreasing your field size, all those good things. And I wouldn't be complete with telling you my story if I didn't tell you that outside of teaching in the self-contained classroom, I actually just recently, last year, switched over to an instructional coaching role. So what I'm doing now is I actually work with 30 self-contained teachers, life skills support teachers, and autistic support teachers. And my job is to kind of push in and support them in their classrooms, give them ideas and tips, and help them to enhance their lessons, help them with behaviors and increasing communication among their students and all those different realms. So that's a new role that I've kind of stepped into since getting my administrative certification. I kind of found that helping other teachers on top of what I do for my business was something I wanted to do in my career as well. So I figured more teachers, more students that I can help, the better. So that's me. Now I'm ready to get diving into boom cards. And on top of, like I said, everything that Nikki said, there's 3 major things I want to share with all of you today. And they are all 3 different ways that in my experiences as an autistic support teacher and even life skills teachers as well, I found were most effective with my students. The first one is establishing a morning routine and utilizing boom cards to do that. So when I started teaching in the self-contained classroom that I mentioned earlier, my first year right out of grad school, not any student teaching experience in special education, I was a little lost and I did not know what was going to be the right things to teach. So the one thing I knew that all of my students needed, just as a life skill, as a functional skill, was understanding what date it was, or what was the weather like outside, or what would you wear if you went outside. All of those practical skills, and those really can be taught at any age level, but I realized my students specifically were lacking that. They had received a lot of academic instruction in their elementary years, and they were lacking that functional piece. So I established a morning routine utilizing morning meeting materials. So if you've not heard of morning meeting before, that's going over things like the date and the weather, and I'm going to be showing you a boom deck that I used for that. And then we also talked about, along with the weather, things like getting dressed and what we should wear. And we did this every single day in my classroom. So I've been teaching self-contained students for about 10 years now, and every single day for 10 years, we did this. And once I was able to figure out a way to incorporate boom cards into it and make it interactive, it got even better. My students were better engaged. They were excited to learn. Not only could we put this up on the smartboard, but we could also, I could also have students working on this individually as well. So we could kind of work on it in two different formats. So I'm going to share my screen and show you. And I will give a little bit of fair warning that they do have audio. So you are probably going to hear some of the prompts included, which is a great benefit to boom cards, but it also can be a little loud. So just so you're aware, but this is an example of the morning meeting boom deck that I would use with my students. I would put this up on the smartboard, but I also would give this maybe to a student if they needed it right in front of them with an iPad or a computer, or we'd even include this in some of the independent work that my students might do later in the day. This is just your simple drag and drop feature on Boom. So it says yesterday was Monday. So I just drag it into the box and then I can hit next.
Today
and there you go. You can hear the awesome audio there. I tried to pick a nice soothing voice there to make it sound good. And then of course you can keep going.
Tomorrow
with the
will
prompts
be
here, filling it in. And I would have my students walk up to the board, drag the pieces, move them around. We take turns. You could even make this a classroom job, and maybe each day one student's in charge of running this in your classroom. But I learned quickly that my students started to internalize this information because we were doing our structure. And as you can see, we're working on all different kinds of skills here: days, months, the date.
The date is.
We're getting the year
is.
And then we get into the
is.
weather. So we talk about things like what the weather is, what the temperature is, how does it feel outside? So all of these things were incorporated into my morning meeting session. Like I said, up on a smartboard, but also students could do this individually as well. So this is something that, again, I said we did every day. But what I found also on top of them internalizing all of these skills is that it was something predictable that my students started to get comfortable with, and it worked great in their schedules. And if we know anything about working with individuals with autism, like Nikki had said, they don't like change. So because we did this every day, my students were calm, they knew what to expect, behaviors were decreased, more compliance happened because they knew what was coming next and they knew what the expectations were. We were going to complete this deck every day together. And my students became more confident, more relaxed, and I love that part about our morning meeting. So along with this deck, we also utilized this deck, which is also in my store, and it's called What Should I Wear Today? And we go quickly, I'm just going to skip through this, but
The
we would
temperature
review the
is.
weather.
It feels.
And
What
then
season is
we
it?
would get
Choose who
somebody
you will
dressed for the day.
dress.
So
Drag and drop the
I told you,
clothes on the person.
her voice is soothing. But we would pick a friend and we'd get them dressed for the day. So this is also another drag and drop. So if we said it's summer, which is what it is where I am in Pennsylvania in the United States, we would be wearing maybe a t-shirt and shorts and maybe some, oops, not the socks. We want those sandals, and then maybe some sunglasses as well. My kids loved doing this. They actually would fight over whose turn it was to do this, but it was super fun to do with the kids. We could talk and problem solve. I could even put the wrong thing on here. So maybe I put the snow boots up here and see if my students are paying attention, right? See if they're catching on. Oh, it's not snowing today, so I don't need to wear the snow boots. Or, oh, it's really hot outside, that's why I need the sandals. So you can ask tons of questioning. Actually, I used to co-teach my morning meeting with my SLP, my speech therapist, and we would throw in a lot of these types of questions on top of, just getting the person dressed. We would focus on asking lots of different questions as well. So this is also something that we built into my morning routine that I did with my students every single day. And again, it created that structure routine. It was a great start to our day. I knew what we were teaching, and we also were able to create that predictability for our students, which helped to keep them calm, and all of their behaviors were a little less, they were less, just because it was more predictable for our students and they knew what was coming next, which we all know is a great feeling for all of us. So I talked a little bit about morning routine. Now I want to show you some things that also were very important in my classroom for my students, which was building communication. So a lot of the students in my classroom struggled with communicating their wants and needs, and even if they could communicate verbally, and I had all different types of learners that utilized AAC or augmentative communication devices, using PECs, using symbol supports, all different types of learners and communicators were in my classroom. I learned that they all got value out of learning different types of vocabulary. And so I started to create boom decks that helped work on those vocabulary skills. And this is an example of one. These are my core vocabulary digital adapted books. And so inside,
He likes to eat apples. What do you
again,
do
there's
to
that
apples?
awesome audio. I will say though, if you ever want to turn off the audio, this little speaker box right up here, you just click that and it will turn off. So if you have kids you want to read these things, then they can read them themselves and complete them too. But all we're going to do here is, like I said, you can use the sound.
Eat. Go.
And the students can
open.
listen and then add in the word. If I had students with AAC devices, I might have them say the word first before we move it. I might model it for the students by clicking that speaker box. I may even have a student with PECs or with those, if they use some kind of visual or communication board to touch or hand out any of those things as well. But this was a great way to add some practical practice in to that communication piece. Get that repetition in that we know our students need in order to learn how to communicate effectively. We know that that repetition has to happen. And so we would move on and complete this book together in class. And I would have the students work through this.
She likes to eat bananas. What do you do
And
to
so
bananas?
I also then created on top of these books, I wanted some fun activities because, like Nikki said before, we need a way to get our kids engaged. We need them to be able to look for things that are fun and engaging and just going to, you know, motivate them to want to work. So right through here, this is all different activities for that same word eat that we were practicing as our vocabulary words. So I have ones here where we can make the word, and they'll use the magnetic letters and drag and drop. And there is an example up here if students need that support. And they get all that automatic feedback when they get things correct.
Make the word.
And so, and I did, like I said, add in multiple repetitions. Would I also have my students on their AAC devices tell me what word this is? Absolutely. Would I also have students that are using PECs or some other visual or communication board tell me? Absolutely. So adding boom cards into this just adds another interactive way for us to work on this. So there's make the word.
Choose an activity or choose
and
all
I will
done.
show you a few more of these. My personal favorite, especially when you're working on increasing communication, is this make the phrase.
Make and say the phrases below.
We're making phrases. So if you have students that are beyond just saying one of these words on their own, you can actually make phrases that maybe are more practical for them, and they would match these by dragging them up. But then we'd also get to practice saying them. And this provides a great model for students to be able to then say them themselves or make them on their devices. And if you have students that can communicate even more than this, have them expand on the sentence. So this eat more what? Eat more cookies, eat more chips, eat that what? So all of this is helpful. And of course, then there's the sound. It's coming. There it is.
Eat.
And you can hear that model as well. So the students can click on these while they're working on them, not just when you're in a whole group, but this can also help them to hear that model for that communication piece. And then
choose an
one more I'm going to
activity or
show you
choose
inside
all
this for
done.
communication are these fun activities.
Help
So
the dog
these I
eat the
feel give it a
food.
little more of a way to generalize the skill. So of course, the word eat, right? We're going to eat things so the kids can have fun by dragging the food over for the dog to eat. Oh no, and it disappears, which you can like make a big deal about, get them all excited. Oh no, where'd the hot dog go, right? And get them engaged and just have fun with it. So I did include some fun activities in those as well, because I wanted to kind of pull my kids in, but also give them a practical way of seeing that word in action. So those are some ways, turn off that sound so you guys don't have to hear it again. But those are some ways that I would increase communication in my classroom utilizing boom cards. Now, there is one other way, aside from all the great ideas Nikki gave, I did use a lot of the same ideas that she did, is actually I created an independent workstation in my classroom just for boom cards. Now, if you're not familiar with an independent workstation, what that is essentially, I'm going to stop sharing for a second just so we can chat. What it is a place in your classroom where you're going to have students go and they are going to work independently and individually by themselves on different types of activities that they know how to do. So you may know of this as a teach system. You may know of this as a work box system. You've seen boxes where students match a letter on the outside of a box and they take the box to their seat, or a drawer system where they open drawer number 1, complete what's inside, open drawer number 2, complete what's inside. And then those are more like what I would consider a physical independent work system. I'm saying use boom cards as an independent work system and add another layer to what you already have in your classroom. And this one is going to be even easier to set up than those physical ones. So I would set up a boom center for my students. You would go on the boom site, you would create accounts for your students, and then you could tailor which of the boom decks, like some of the ones I showed here or different ones, just specifically for those students that would meet their individual needs. And once you assign them, then you could have the students spend so much time during the day in an area of the classroom. It could be a table, it could be a desk where they have access to a computer or an iPad or some other device, and they can work on their boom cards. Typically, I would set a timer and put it right there at the station with the student. It could be 15 minutes, it could be 20, it could be 30, depending on that student's ability to do the work independently. But we would set a timer and they would know that it's their job to sit there at their seat and work on boom cards. And they would work inside those decks that I would hand select for those students that they needed to work on. Now, remember, if it's independent work, it means it's things they already know how to do. So I would not give them decks that are too difficult for them. Those decks might be good for working with a paraprofessional, with myself, or up on the screen in our classroom as a whole class activity. All of the decks I would give the students would be things they could already do. And utilizing things, if you have students that you're like, wait, I'm not sure if that student I'm thinking of could actually do this, then those errorless ones that Nikki mentioned earlier would be perfect. I also have errorless activities in my store as well. If you need help finding them, I can also help you with that too. But I'm going to share again and show you one more time just some of the activities I might throw into an independent workstation. And here we go. So here's an example. This one is how many syllables. So you can clap out the word and you can choose how many syllables it has. So avocado has 4. So we can click on 4. And we're working on reading skills here. Some other ones I have.
How many syllables?
Counting. So counting the circles and choosing the number. And I would add in a lot of academic skills to this part of my station with my students. Measuring. This one's a science-based deck. So the 5 senses, which sense is she currently using in this picture? This one would be another science one. Is it a solid, liquid, or gas? And then even some social studies ones, such as rural, urban, or suburban. So lots of different ways you can utilize Boom in an independent workstation. And then, of course, really quick, I wanted to show you some life skills as well. I know Nikki touched on it, but also doing things like community signs, and then even ones like this that are more fun for the students. This is creating an ice cream cone based on the order, and they would drag and drop and get some practice doing that as well. So again, if you haven't yet thought about creating an independent work system for your students using Boom cards in your classroom, I highly recommend it.
Love that. Thank you, Jen. That was amazing. I love that presentation. And I really wanted to say, so we're moving over to the Q&A section and the live Q&A. So we've been seeing your questions in the Q&A box. But before that, I wanted to say that I asked Nikki to talk a little bit about like how different teachers for students with autism create decks. And I think you all noticed that they're super simple, super specific. And like Nikki said, it is, it has a purpose. And, that's why if you go into any autism store in the Boom store, you'll notice this pattern is like, oh, they're more simple. Like both Jen's and Nikki's look kind of the same, but it is because, there's a purpose on that. So thank you for showing that you both. And so let's go over to the live Q&A because we have a lot of questions. And so the first one we have is from Sylvia, and she's asking, how would you motivate kids with mild severe autism to be engaged in Boom cards? So anyone can start.
I can take it. So a lot of times I feel like some of that motivation comes from you as the teacher and setting up that environment, making it engaging, making it fun for the students, getting excited, kind of building up some of that hype for using them. And then of course, you can always add in, as we do in our classrooms typically, some kind of a reinforcer, right? And a reinforcer is something that will reward our students for doing something that we would like them to do, right? So if we want them to work on Boom for 5 minutes, and like I talked about earlier, setting that timer for that student, and then once they work on it for 5 minutes, I might utilize some kind of a visual that says, first work on Boom, and then they could earn something like maybe a sensory toy they really like. So taking that and kind of tying it in with using the Boom cards, I think can be super motivating. I also know some of the kids are super motivated by the sounds. So if you heard some of the dinging noises when I was showing them, a lot of the students like those sounds and that automatic and very quick feedback that they get when they get an answer correct. So that can also be motivating as well. But I think the more you build it into your day, and Nikki kind of talked about that as well, the more the students get used to it, and then they're more motivated to use it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And Nikki, can you share a little bit for online classes? Because Sylvia also asked specifically during online classes, how do you do it?
So I think the main thing I would go with, especially online, because you're not going to be there in person with them, is try and make sure that families are going to get on board as well and really help you out. You can, on the Boom decks, you can actually have the first page and start with a first then, like Jen was saying. So have that first then on that page. And for me, starting with Errorless has always worked out really well because it's just a bit more enjoyable for them when they get that instant, I got it right. I like this. I get it right. I get every question right. Like, I want to keep doing this. It's like, it's like when you go on a training as a teacher, if you go on, if it's a new teacher, they put you on a training course for teachers of 10 years plus, you're going to start looking around the room going, what is everyone talking about? I have no idea. It's my first year. But if you go on a first year teacher training course, you're going to understand a lot more. You're going to feel more connected to what is being shown to you, but also putting students' interests in there as well. So I think I spoke to you, Yanni, before about how I spent hours online looking for a bee resource for one of my students who was absolutely crazy for bees, and took me forever to find this resource. But when I started to make Boom decks around bees, he absolutely loved it. And I could touch on science, I could do maths, I could do literacy, I could do geography, I could do so much with him when it was based around his interest. So I think try and think about things that really motivate them. So like if you have a student who loves cars, how can you make some car Boom decks? Can you put that into your math skills? What do you need them to work on, and try and coax them into that as well. And It depends what your students are used to. So for my students, iPads are really hard to do it for because iPads at home are YouTube and, you know, all the fun things. iPads are fun things at home. They don't understand that then iPads might be used for work. So that is something I slowly build up to my students with. But, you know, if they can use a computer at home and a parent is willing to sit there and let them see that, okay, we're going on the computer now, they can start to link, okay, the computer is work time and the iPad for now is playtime. And then as that progression builds, you can start to introduce, okay, today I want you to work on the iPad. And then we're going to start to show them that we can work on the computer, we can work on the iPad. But I think very much start with Errorless, try and get families on board, try send those visuals, try put those visuals on the screen and use high interest things. And there's so many boom cards available. You'll probably find something in their interest. And if not, it is genuinely a really easy to navigate website. So you'll be able to come up with something without too much stress and taking too much time. So
thank you for sharing that. So now we have Jody asking, are boom cards interactive with smart boards or do they need special software? So, Jen, you were going to. Oh. Jen, can you hear me?
Yes, sorry.
You froze for a moment.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, they are interactive with smart boards. So any kind of technology that you would use them on, they are interactive on. So that's why the example I gave earlier of using that morning meeting, I would present that whole group. I'd have my students sitting at a horseshoe table. We would all work on it together. It would be up on the smart board and we could, you know, drag and drop and click and type and do all the things that we wanted to right there up on that smart board. So it made it interactive, but I also, like I said, could use it in that whole group setting.
Thank you. And moving over to another questions because we're kind of at time. So Nikki, what strategies do you do? Oh, sorry, the question moved. What strategies do you do when a kid with mild severe autism doesn't want to work using boom cards if he shows inappropriate behavior?
I think try and think of boom cards like you would do any other lesson in your classroom. I think sometimes the worry of trying something new, we can kind of overthink and over worry about it. So I think a lot of role modeling, first of all. So I introduce boom cards after like our morning meeting so I can have staff show them and show what I want. And a lot of my students do respond better when I show them the behaviors I want to see. Visuals, it's very dependent on how you manage these behaviors and you manage this motivation with your students in the classroom anyway. Every child is a little different, so it's a kind of hard question because I could tell you to use visuals and this could be a child who hates visuals. I had a child who, if we use visuals, he would go flush them down the toilet. He didn't want visuals. So I don't want to give you advice and then you have a child who goes and flushes visuals down the toilet. But just think of it like any other activity. So first and then boards work really well for me. I always start with a really small deck. So I might make a deck. I've had students where, you know, we're talking 30-second attention span. So we may do 2 cards and then, okay, you can go and you can have a break for a minute. And then 2 minutes later, I bring them back and let's do another one. And the goal could be that they complete 5 cards in a 15-minute session. If they're displaying inappropriate behaviors, sort of see, it's quite hard because inappropriate behavior, is it something that are they showing those behaviors, but they're still completing the activity? And it's very much pick your battles, you know, are they swearing at you while they complete it, but they're completing it? So we can work on that language with them and be like, okay, I know you're frustrated. I know it's something new, but come on, let's do 2 more decks. Let's just do 2 more and then we're finished. And I think very much having that positive reinforcement, the rewards at the end. So I have some students who really like stickers. I have some students who work for extra outdoor time and they want to play with sand pits. So I think those things, but I would also take into account why why don't they want to work with Boom Cards? So is it that they associate the iPad with playtime and YouTube, and they don't really like that you are trying to get them to work on the iPad because it's a change, it's something they're not quite used to? So maybe start on the computer or the interactive whiteboard, and then we'll build up back to that iPad. Once they're on the iPad, you can lock them in. It's an amazing tool where you can lock them in so they can't leave that app. So you can do that as well, but of course that might play into the frustration with a lot of students. So start with a computer or an interactive whiteboard, try to take it somewhere else. If you think an iPad will work best, maybe just change the environment. Maybe look at the Boom Deck. Is it too easy for them and they're bored and they don't want to waste their time on it? Or is it too hard? Do they not really understand how to use it? Do they not understand click and drag and they're getting frustrated? And then on top of that, they don't know how to use the Boom Deck. Plus they have to try and find the right question and answer, and they don't know what they're doing. And then it's all this overwhelm, and then they don't want nothing to do with it. So try and look to see what that trigger is. Try again, focus on high interests, things that really motivate them, have those visuals, have the reward, and a lot of positive reinforcement. And it's okay to take a break as well. So it's okay to only do them after morning meeting, and just do Boom Decks after morning meeting for 5 minutes every day. And you don't have to have every student do that Boom Deck. So if I have a student who's not a huge fan of Boom Decks, maybe I'll choose them Monday, Wednesday, Friday, maybe Tuesday, Thursday. I'll give them a bit of an out, and it's okay. I'm going to give you a break from it today. And then the next day they might feel a bit better. The next day they might decide that they want to do 3 or 4 Boom Decks. It just depends, but just sort of ease them into it. Think of it as, I hate change. I hate change, any change. And new software is something that I hate and I don't want to do it. So try and put yourself in their position and think like, what would make this easier for me? So when I first started making Boom Decks, I had my friend teach me and show me how she used them in her classroom, so I could visualize and I could see like, oh, this isn't actually scary at all. This is actually really easy. Like, I've been overthinking this. And it's the same for our students. So think about, maybe he's just really confused with it all. So just think, can you sit down and help me? I'm trying to learn this new game and I am stuck. Can you help me? And a lot of students will willingly help you do the activity that they didn't want to do. So they're still doing the activity, but they're helping you, and you can role model with them as well. So hopefully that kind of gives you a few ideas.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So we have a lot of other questions that we'll be answering. So we'll leave the webinar open, but we're going to be finishing the section right now. So thank you all for being here. Thank you again, Nikki, and thank you, Jen. Anything else that you wanted to add? Anything you want to say to the audience?
Just thank you for coming and taking the time. I know you all are so busy and dedicating so much time to your students. So thank you for coming and learning about Boom today with us.
Just what Jen said. Thank you for coming. I know lots of you are probably in the middle of summer break and not really wanting to do a whole lot of work stuff. So thank you for coming. Hopefully me and Jen have been able to give you a lot of ideas, and hopefully that will make teaching Boom Cards and ICT a bit easier for you this school year as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you both. You were amazing, both of you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for everyone who joined us. Remember, tomorrow will be our last day of our Boom Learning Symposium. So join us for our last sections. We'll be having one for special ed. We'll be having one for SLPs and many other sections. So make sure to join us. Oh, another one for AAC. So that will be a good one. So make sure to join us for those. Thank you again to our amazing presenters, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye, everyone.